Welcome back to Reconfiguring Reality. I'm Chesh.
I'm Jessie.
I'm Laura.
I'm the Jericho.
Today's topic is the 5 stages of grief.
So when somebody says the 5 stages of grief, we automatically jump to grief over losing a someone, right?
Yes.
Not me, but I can see where people do it.
Where do you go?
I often associate grief with regret.
Hmm.
Like for me, because of how my mind works, I often have like a very long thought process when there's a greater topic that I can't answer quickly. So it could be, it's almost like putting on things on layaway. It might be something from 8 months ago that I'm just like, and then I reach a deeper analysis of it.
So
Also,
when
depending on which stage of grief I'm in about any particular thing, some of it's more taxing than others, which is more time consuming to process. So I just shelve it till later.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. Depends on what it is. I'll shelve it and maybe one day get back to it.
so you would say that regret is a type of grief or something to grieve over?
For me, it's a source of grief.
All right.
Because think about it, when you have a regret, it often brings on what? Depression, anger, acceptance, denial, right? Like you did a really shitty thing when you were young, like you tricked somebody into sleeping with you, right? Like they weren't ready, but you like pulled and tugged or something, or maybe you went out with somebody as a joke just to be mean, and then like bash on them with your friends or something. There's lots of things
Mm-hmm.
that shitty people do in high school, right? So all of those things are regrets, but why do you regret it? Because it makes you feel bad, right? If it made you feel happy, you wouldn't regret it. So another way of feeling bad is grief, right? Like you feel for that mistake you made one way or another. Usually denial is always first, right, when it comes to those because you're like, I didn't really do anything that bad. It was
Well,
just a joke,
well, there is
right?
no first. The stages of grief aren't in a definite
Sorry.
order.
Right. I'm saying though, most people who deal with the regret, they first suppress, they deny it, and say it's not that bad. It was just a joke. You know, everybody gets teased, yada yada, right? Then it goes to anger because they become defensive because people are now putting the blame on them, and they feel bad because whether they agree with it or not, they don't like the anti praise that comes with it, right? And then bargaining, right? If they reach that point, they start trying to be like, well, look, I mean, like look at all the good stuff I've done, right? Like it's not like I just do this every day, right? Like which is and then depression when they finally can't beat it, and then finally acceptance. I mean, there's no definitive order that's correct, but no one is acceptance first, and then the rest comes later. Like no
Yeah,
one's
so
no one's
acceptance
like
is like a
I got it.
guaranteed, like, very last stage of grief.
Yeah,
Do you always reach that stage of acceptance though?
No. Well,
I
it's been
mean,
11, almost 12 years, and I'm still in the anger stage.
when someone's inconsolable and they're just lying in bed wishing for death because they lost their wife or husband or whatever. Like that's when you're not accepting it. If you can go day to day, and if the thought can hit you and doesn't paralyze you in the spot, then you've accepted it. Doesn't mean you're cured or you're dealing with it very well. It just means that you've acknowledged whatever it is the loss has been to you personally and are working on it. You're able to move forward.
See, but even in these examples, you're talking about losing someone, but there are other forms of grief
Well, not just someone, it's loss. Grief is the loss of something, right? So,
or change.
well, what has changed but if not loss? Right? If you were innocent as a child and then you became a young adult, what happened? You lost your childhood innocence. If you are a grandparent, right? You have lost your midlife at that point because you've now transitioned to an older state of being. Grief is all about loss. It's not necessarily the loss of a person, but it's a loss of something.
Yeah, but do people really actually grieve their loss of childhood?
Oh yeah,
Oh my!
Really?
Have you never
think
seen all
about it.
these women that? Oh my gosh, I can't believe them. How could like grieve over turning 30 or 40?
I
Just
mean, I was a little annoyed that I turned 30, but
Why?
I mean, because it's like
You lost your you,
midlife.
yeah, exactly. You
Well,
lost your
no, but
youth.
I,
Chesh doesn't know what that
I,
means, like what that
yeah.
feels like yet.
Josh does know what that means, but it's fine. I just don't have a lot to say on this topic.
No, I meant you didn't know what it means to lose your youth, you weirdo. You're still young.
No, no, I know what that means. I'm in my mid
Oh,
20s.
that's a,
oh my
still,
God, you're ancient.
Oh,
like a
compared to everybody in
baby.
here, I understand I'm not the oldest one here. I know I'm the baby.
No, I do know that when you changed jobs, Chesh, there was that
Hmm.
little period of anxiety of going from one job to the new one. You know, from the
Oh no, I
the
was
lawyer's
so
office to
happy
the
to leave
daycare.
the lawyer's office. I was so happy.
Right, but there was still a huge change there. You didn't go through the
Yeah.
emotions of anxiety and panic and.
Well, during that time is when we also found out about my Crohn's diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot more intermix than just changing of a job. It was, okay, I have to change my entire life,
Uh huh.
get on medication that pretty much means I mean, I may not look it, but I am considered disabled because I'm immune compromised.
Yeah. So, diagnosis of a
So,
terminal illness is
well, I
one of the
wouldn't
things.
call I wouldn't call my illness a terminal illness. Terminal to me means like untreatable cancer.
Okay. Loss of good health
She
because
has
of
a
illness is on
chronic
here as well.
illness.
Yeah, I would say like something like that because for me, like people, I have Crohn's disease, so people who have Crohn's can live very fulfilling and very happy lives as long as we're medicated
Right.
and the medication works. My mother, her last option is a literal cocktail of several different drugs. Um, because once one class of medication stops working, then that means everything else in that class is not going to work for you,
Mm-hmm.
and you move to the next one. So she's done 4-hour infusions because that's just how long they take, and then you get shots.
Oof.
I believe her next round it's just all infusions. There's no shots.
Has she gone through the stages of grief on
We're
that?
a bit different when it comes to things like that. We more along the lines just go, it is what it is, and just do what we need to do for our health.
Mm-hmm.
I know when I got my Crohn's diagnosis, I was very surprised because for a very long time I was like, it's not this, it can't be this, there's no way it's this. And, I get really sick, and then finally we have a damn answer is it's that. So I went through a lot of it for sure. For our listeners, if you look up Crohn's patients, we're usually very thin, kind of anorexic looking. Um, or very like normal-ish looking if it's treated well. Since my mother had her bowel removed, portions of her bowel removed, she is on the how do I politely say this? She's on the heavier side because she doesn't have that part of her bowel that would really kind of it's what keeps us small.
Huh.
Well, it also depends
And
because
she
my
has a
mom
hard
had a
time losing
huge.
weight too.
Yeah, like my mom had Crohn's disease and she had a huge section of her bowel removed and she was
Mhm.
smaller than I am.
So yeah, I think it also plays a part in genetics wise, but I know that she struggled for a very long period of time, and it was something where she didn't want to pass this down, and she went through the same thing when I got my diagnosis of, oh my God, like I did this to you.
Okay. Well,
I'm the reason this happened.
that right there is a stage of grief.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm trying to tie it
Yeah.
into our topic.
So, there's a list of just some of the things that I found online, just a small list of things that people may feel grief over. Of course, the first one is death of a loved one. Then you
Death
have,
is usually a big one.
yeah. Then you have divorce or separation,
Mm-hmm.
loss of a beloved pet,
Mm-hmm.
giving up on something that mattered, work changes, diagnosis of terminal illness, loss of good health because of illness, accident, or disability, miscarriage or infertility, having a child with a disability, terminal illness, or substance abuse, moving away or separation from family or friends, or having an empty nest when the children leave home.
Oh yeah, empty nest syndrome.
Uh huh.
My mom would tell me about that when my brother and I moved out. She's like, "Yeah, it felt so weird."
I can't fucking wait.
You're never gonna
Well,
have
no,
an empty
that was
nest.
that was her same reaction, Jesse. That was her same thing. I'm just like, "Oh, yes, like empty nest, let's go." But then when we actually did move out, like my mom and I, when I lived on my own, we called every morning. We talked every morning. That was our routine. That's how she helped cope with the whole empty nest syndrome.
I think it's a double edged sword because you can't wait for the kids to go and be on their own so that you can have your life back. You know, that feeling of
Mhm.
having your life and be able to do what you want. But the loneliness of it can get to you.
But I think that's also when your relationship has evolved more, because my mom and I would consider us, we have moments where, yes, she is my mom, I am her daughter, but then we have moments where, like, she's my friend.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely think the relationship grows more as the child, gets older and leaves.
I guess I look at it as different as I did my job, I raised you, get the fuck out of my house so I can finish living my life the way I want to live it. It's time for you to flap your wings and create your own trail, and I'm gonna finish flapping mine before I croak.
Flap, baby, flap.
I know that must sound very cold hearted, but
No, I mean, we each have our own parenting styles. So everyone reacts to grief differently, of course. You know, and we talked about the denial and the anger and the guilt. Numbness is one that people feel, or blame, or even relief. And I found an article. It's really interesting. It's an article from healthdirect.gov, but I think this is an Australian website.
mm-hmm.
So it was really neat to see um, different cultural views on it. But other effects of grief, they list here emotional, physical, spiritual, post traumatic growth, and of course the grief and depression, right?
Mm-hmm.
And every one of these, somewhere in here says if you feel you need help, seek it. And I am going to I'm going to put a website in our description here that has, it's a mental health hotline.org that has all different kinds of hotlines for the United States. I do know that people who are grieving often have a hard time letting themselves grieve. Does that statement make sense?
Yeah. Like when my mom died, I didn't get a chance to feel anything. I had to make sure everybody else was okay.
So
So then you just kind of get used to not dealing with it, and then it just keeps the days pass by and you keep going, and you it's not that you grieve, it's just you, by the time you realize how much time has gone by, there's no point in it anymore, because it, like with my dad, Liam was a couple days old and my dad passed. Then Liam had all his medical issues and everything, so it was, I didn't get time to grieve for my dad. It was, I need to take care of this sick baby. And then by the time he was healthy, well, not even really healthy enough, because then you add on, couldn't figure out why he was so small. Like, there were just so many things where it's you I just shut down, because it's like, I can't fucking do anything. I can't change anything, so I might as well just accept it right off the fucking bat. Because I can't fix, I don't like using the word fixed, but I can't change Liam to not have what's wrong with him. So there's no point in being depressed about it or sad about it, because there's nothing I can do. And if I'm sad and depressed about it and I can't get out of bed, I'm not helping making sure my child gets what he needs. So there's no point, in my opinion, to sit there and lay in bed for days on end being sad about something that you cannot change.
what about your marriage? Did you grieve your marriage?
Oh, fuck no. I fucking celebrated that shit.
Yeah, there are certain things in certain situations where you're just gonna straight up celebrate.
It depends on the person. Like, if it was a fully happy marriage, and I was, because I was the one that wanted it to end. I was not sad. It was, for me, it was freeing. It was, I get my independence back. I get to just be me. I just kind of like, there are days, and Chesh can even attest to this.
Mhm.
I'll text and say I miss my dad,
Yep.
Uh-huh.
but there's nothing I can do. I can be sad, but like, even when my mom passed, I don't think, because she passed in January, I don't think I really like shed a tear until we actually like buried her ashes. And that was for like a quick 5 seconds that I cried, and then I shut it down, because it's like, there's no point in crying over something you can't change.
What about, we've all had that one friend in our life that was kind of toxic, but we kept them around because of one reason or another.
Really? Really? You gotta bring that up?
Because we still go through grief when that friendship ends, even though we know it wasn't.
No, because you're gonna make me sound like a total bitch that I mourned losing a toxic person over my
I've done it.
parents.
I've done it. I've mourned over losing a toxic person.
Yeah, but like,
Yeah, I'm gonna have
it
to go.
debilitated me compared to like losing my mother or my dad.
Um. So yeah, I've had a friendship like that. Yes.
I have not. I had a toxic friend, and I did a jig when I lost him.
I just don't tolerate bullshit anymore.
Anymore, but before, you've had a friend like that too, haven't you?
Nope. It's again, Laura, you've known me for years. I'm not one to hold my tongue, and usually the people that don't like the fact that I don't hold my tongue and I say what I say and I don't really have a filter are the ones that go, "Oh, bye." Or I just stop talking to them. So, I mean, it's a give and take kind of situation in my thought process here. Like they might have been and I just didn't notice and I said what I said and they didn't like it and they probably just fucked off. Um, I know a streamer, I was in his Discord. He was very toxic to the point of just making like secret rooms and only allowing certain people into them that he deemed friends. And I straight up was just very vocal about that. And I was like, all right, cool, dip. I dipped. Like, I didn't try to fix it. I didn't beg for it. I just left.
Hmm.
I was like, I'm not going to sit here and be a part of a community that clearly the owner of said community isn't, worth my time. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
Like if you can't value your people, then
That sounds like a topic that should have been discussed in the toxicity episode.
We recorded that one at the end of August.
I did mourn the loss of Lost Souls and the
well, but
loss of
it's your
that group of
baby.
people. But at the same time, I can see
But
the difference
okay,
of the
as an
people in it.
outsider looking in that scenario,
Mm-hmm.
they caused the issues but wanted to play the victim.
Hmm.
Yes, it
So
was
they
very
turned
much a
around to
victim
make it look like
mentality.
you were the bad person when it was them. And so I can see where you mourned it because you were in it, but as like a third party just seeing everything, I'm surprised you stayed as long as you did.
Yeah, I tried.
I was proud of you for how long you took care of Lost Souls, and I was very proud of you for standing up for yourself when the guys decided they were just going to be assholes. Because you showed, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, you showed maturity.
The craziest thing is I miss Ginger
The hell
I
is
don't.
Ginger?
because we sat for days in calls and talked, but like
Yes, but
that
obviously
change.
obviously the
It didn't
friendship
mean
meant
enough.
more to you than it
Yep.
does to him.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I am in that, that grieving stage with him.
Well, like it's just with me and he who shall not be named.
Right.
We were friends for a decade, a
Mhm.
fucking decade. He was my rock. And yes, I know it was a very toxic relationship and
Mhm.
and everything like that, but for someone like me, that even if it's toxic, you don't like that feel of abandonment, so you'll accept it. And there are times where like I'll even be like, I really fucking miss him right now. And I'll have to like message Bubba and be like, I'm missing him, and he'll fucking be like, snap the fuck out of it. And then
No,
he has
she'll
to
tell
like
me
do
too,
the
and I'm like,
bullet
dude.
points of remember what he did. Remember
Yep.
how he treated you. And
Yep.
then it kind of makes your brain sit there and be like, okay, I'm not depressed about this. I've accepted this. I miss what I thought the friendship was,
Yes.
not what it actually
Yes,
was.
exactly. Exactly.
Because like I tell Josh, I'm not allowed to date anymore. I don't see red flags.
Mm-hmm. I see him.
And that's the another thing, like when you're seeing somebody and you break up or whatever and you go your separate ways, you miss what could have been. You don't necessarily miss the person.
You missed what you tricked your mind into thinking the relationship was.
Right. And that's a grieving process.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I already came to acceptance over the last one.
Uh,
Now I know I
I
have.
don't know, I think you're still in anger,
a little
personally.
bit of anger. You're
Yeah,
a
but
mix of anger and
I accept that
acceptance.
it's done, but that doesn't mean I still can't be angry for what he
No, no,
did.
no.
Right.
Like I said, you're a mix of anger and acceptance.
Well, there's a thing that I think that people are missing here. When you get to the stage, right? The stage is an all-consuming thing. It's not I'm a little bit of this, I'm a little bit of that. So you can be angry about a situation for the rest of your life. And it's not because you haven't accepted it, it's because it genuinely upsets you. It'd be like if I brought up the topic of forced sexual encounters, right? Nobody's ever going to be like, yeah, I'm okay with that. Like, it may not elicit you to just grab an axe and go look for somebody, but that's the difference in the two. That's what they talk about is when you've hit acceptance, it no longer has power over you. Like you can still feel upset, you can still feel depressed, you can still feel sad in the remembrance of it. Part of that nostalgic memory is that. That's just being human. But when it talks about you're in a stage, it means that that's like your whole personality becomes that stage. When you're depressed, you are depressed. I don't want to move. I don't want to work. I don't want to eat. I don't want to sit. You are depressed.
But the thing is depression, there's many different forms. There is high functioning depression where you can be clinically depressed, but you still go to work. You still function in your everyday life. And then
Right.
it's at the end of the night is where it's crippling. So you're still depressed, but
Right, but that crippling part is still there is what I'm getting at.
yeah,
When
so
it
it'll
talks
still
about reaching acceptance, that crippling part is no longer there. It doesn't mean you can't have a day where you wake up and you're in tears
you're
because you remember your
angry
mom or
or
whatever.
you're sad.
Yeah, you're angry, you're sad, whatever the case may be. What it's referring to as being in a stage means that you haven't moved on to the point that you don't keep having these reoccurring events. It would be like, think of them like panic attacks, right? Like no one has reached the acceptance level of panic attacks. Like they happen and you have to deal with them. This is the opposite of that, right? Instead of you're in a depressive state, now you're crumpled in a ball for the next hour. It's yes, I can be depressed about it. Yes, I can think about the loss or whatever, but life goes on.
Yeah, like I'll sit there. There are days where, and it's been almost 12 years where I'm angry my dad's gone. But then the next day I'm perfectly fine. I've accepted he's gone. It doesn't control my life anymore though, where I'm up I'm angry all the time every day. I'm not laying in bed crying because my dog's gone. I'm not trying to bargain, be like, okay, I promise I'll I won't hurt another person's feelings again if this person just comes back into my life. Like all those are gone. But you can have those moments or even just briefs like flicks of all of a sudden you get a wave of sadness because I don't know, and it
Yeah,
happens all the
that's what
time for me
nostalgia
is
does. You go
yeah,
down memory lane, and not all memories are happy, and that's okay. Like for those
like
who might have seen the movie Inside Out, that's what the whole
mhm.
point of the first movie is that not every memory has to be an all-encompassing thing. It's not just a happy memory. It's not just a sad memory. They're a combination of things.
Yeah, like I can sit there and if I'm at Target and a gentleman walks by and he's wearing a very specific cologne like my grandpa did. It depends on the day and like the events of the day. I can either smile or be sad or but that's the thing, like it's never gonna stop. You don't just accept it and your life goes on and you'll never be sad about a person being gone or losing a job or losing a friend or anything like that. You're never gonna be like, okay, I accept it. I'm gonna move on. It's never gonna bother me again.
Jericho, did you feel any sort of grief when your first marriage broke up?
Oh yeah, totally.
She would have said no because now I just sound like a horrible person being like, I
No, but your
celebrated mine.
situation was
Your
different.
situation was probably very, very different.
Oh yeah, no, I've heard stories.
Well, so you have to remember though, like again, it's different strokes for different folks and the way things go.
You guys
Like,
were together since high school, though, right?
yeah, not like the beginning of high school, but yeah, we were together for just shy of 11 years.
It's a long time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How long was your marriage, Jess?
I got married in '09. Divorce was finalized 2021. So legally we were married for what, 13 years?
But how long were you actually together?
I moved in 2017, so 8. But he was also gone for 2 of those years, so push it to like 6.
I was in a relationship with the father of my children for 6.5 years, but I wasn't married to him.
I guess it like he said it depends on the person, but I guess for me it was just I hit that point where it's like I'm done trying. I just want to be happy and maybe it is a for like maybe there's different forms of grief where it was just a relief to not be married anymore.
That is Definitely, I
So
did say
so
relief is one of those things.
I was the one that was like, "Hey, I want a divorce." So maybe it also depends on it. Maybe it would have been different if the roles would have been reversed. Maybe I would have been grieving us getting a divorce.
Well, the other thing to consider too is each person's different, right? So some people, if there's an emotion they gravitate towards more than other emotions, like sadness or depression or whatever, then they tend to still feel those other ones. They're just less. They get overshadowed by that bigger emotion. Like they'll do things like they'll be crying their eyes out and be like, "It's why is it, it's unfair? What did I do wrong?" Blah blah blah. And then all of a sudden they'll get a spout of anger and just be like, "That son of a bitch," and kind of like a moment of clarity, but then they go right back to being depressed again.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's kind of how that plays out, right? So
Here's a question for Chash.
Hmm.
When Grover ran away, or whatever, didn't come back, did you go through grief over him?
Um, not particularly.
Lies.
I was sad about it, but like, I didn't get angry or
You
anything.
were no, there were times where you were a little bit angry because it's like if someone fucking stole my cat.
No, no. Why would someone steal my cat? Would sit in the backyard. He literally would sit in the backyard. He learned how to hop the fence. I already know that our area was not I mean, where we live now, we've lost multiple cats. That was a situation Mom and I had already discussed before I moved back in, so it was a possibility. So I wasn't like overly like, oh my God. I like to think that because he looked like a well fed cat, I'd like to think because somebody probably took him in because we're a very cat friendly neighborhood. And most people, when they take in cats off the street, they don't take them to the vet. So, like, was I not happy about it? Yeah, I lost my cat, but at the same time, I'd like to think that he's with somebody who's providing a better life than what I could have provided.
All right.
Wasn't like overly mad.
So, Chash, how long was your first marriage? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, hasn't happened yet.
Because you're still a
Hopefully, it is only
baby.
one.
Oh, goodness gracious.
that's ageist, have you know.
My first marriage, mm, still going.
Oh, yeah,
Well,
technically,
good
Jericho
for
is your first
you.
marriage.
Yeah, Jericho is my first marriage. Yep. I was also old when I married him.
Old.
One and done. So you get it done.
So we had a missionary stop by. He's been off of his missions for a while now, and maybe 2 months or something like that, which is a while for missionaries. So he stopped by the other day with his family, and on the way out, we said, come back in, visit any time, and his dad was like, yeah, next time he'll bring his wife, and I was like, you don't have to rush him into getting married. Like he was 20 years old. Like you don't have to rush this kid into getting married.
You say rush, but I mean, think about the times, right? Like not too far back, people were getting married in their teens, their early teens at that. Like theoretically, being in 20s, you're kind of old.
I know, but I see all these missionaries go home after the mission and they're immediately engaged, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, you're so young.
Yeah, but look at
Maybe
what
it's a
happens
me
to
thing.
people who wait. You know what I mean?
She waited.
Did she though?
Uh,
She waited to sign a piece of paper. She did not wait to have kids in a relationship
Okay, but why does that why does that matter that she decided to have a family before she got married?
because it worked out amazingly well.
For you.
For me, yes. But we've had this discussion between the two of us before,
Uh,
and as much as we like to fantasize about, man, I wish I met you when I was younger, we wouldn't have liked each other when we were younger.
nope.
We probably never would have gotten together.
Absolutely
Like
not.
Yeah, no, and I'm
m-
not saying that, but it
maturity and
worked out
perspective
for
bring
both
a
of
lot
you.
to a relationship.
I would
That's
have
why
told him to fuck off so many times already. If I was younger,
That's why being married younger is a benefit because um, it's it allows you to grow together,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
and you you get to experience a lot of life and deal with things because when you're older you have your damaged goods, right? And I don't mean that for like body count reasons or whatever. I just mean like life changes you.
We have a
Even
lot of
employers
baggage.
employers
Yeah,
love
but
hiring kids because not because they're cheap necessarily, but because they can mold them. When you've already hired somebody who's got 20 years of experience, they do things their way, not your way. So that's a
yeah, but
real
look at
hard
it.
sell.
But think of it this way: when you're younger, you're naive, thinking, "Oh, I'm in love with this person. Everything will work out. We can grow together." And then you get you sit there, and then like me, I got married young. I had kids young, and
Okay.
I tried everything in my power to sit there and make my marriage work.
Right, but did your husband try everything in his power to
No.
make your marriage work?
But
That
if we
okay.
actually would have spent time, like even just living together before we were married and stuff like that, we would have realized we were not compatible at all whatsoever. But it
Right.
was, oh, I love this person. He asked me to marry him. I'm going to say yes because we both love each other. Well, you don't even really know what fucking love is. You don't
Well,
need just love to make a marriage work. But in my opinion, a lot of young people think, oh, I love them no matter what. We're going to work through everything. And then they're sitting there being like, fuck you, Disney, for making me think love's all you need.
right, but
I
the
really said
problem with
that.
that is that you're comparing the difference of naive and uneducated people with educated people. And I don't mean just scholastic education. I mean like the people like in the example we're talking about missionaries and things. They grew up in a family with a proper family unit, with proper family ethics, where they've had positive role models of male and females to adhere to. And they've just spent several years devoted purely to God, whether you like God or not, or believe in it, whatever. But that kind of mental fortitude and commitment is not an easy thing for a young person to do. So they're far more mature and ready for the complexities of a deeper relationship than just random people who are like, I like fucking because fucking's cool, and hey, I like you, so now we're together. That it's you're comparing apples and oranges. That's like saying a porn
Can
star should
can I
teach sex ed.
can I ask why you said proper though instead of societal proper? Because
Because that's
what
what
society's proper is based off of the majority rule. That doesn't mean it's proper.
so to a good point to educate to the listeners. So I believe in things called universal truths. I believe that without a law in place, that the moral prerogative should take fold.
But
So,
whose
in other
morals?
words, like murdering and raping, I should not have someone have to tell me that's a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like inherently, it doesn't feel good, right? Now, it may feel good in some sort of sadistic way or dark way or whatever, but I'm just saying that we all know what we're doing. No one just trips and falls into raping somebody, right? Like I know it's a hot button topic, but that's my point, right? So like when I say a proper couple, I mean people who are ready to spend their life together, that have role
Okay.
models to go
So
by.
not based off.
Like you're talking about man and woman, like I'm talking about like the
No.
cisgender
I
couple.
didn't even take that. I didn't even take it that
Oh,
way.
okay.
Is are you saying that like it you because when you say proper family, I took it as you're saying a two parent household.
Well, yeah, I mean that a
So,
two-parent household is what's needed. Without positive male and female role models in, it's been
but
scientifically proven that children grow up with
but
dysfunctions and the inability to cope with things in society. It doesn't mean everybody turns into Dahmer, but
no. But the
it's a
thing
difference
is what
between
happens if
100% and 90%, right?
But okay, but what happens if a woman's married to a military personnel, let's say, and
Okay.
her husband passes away, and then
hmm
she moves back home, and her brother doesn't live with her, but that is the male role model. That's not necessarily what is considered a proper family unit because it's the brother and her not finding some other man to marry and be that role model.
Well, I think you're confusing proper with what I'm saying. So a proper means
Okay,
a
that's
positive
why I'm
male and
asking for
female
clarification.
role model. That could be the grandparents, that could be the mom and dad, that could be
Okay, so
uncle
I
and
just
aunt.
took it the wrong way. Okay.
Yeah.
Nope,
You
that's fine.
took the
That's why I
same
asked.
you to have the same knee jerk response. A lot of people do. They think proper means cis, like one, like traditional, like nuclear family. It has to be this, very homogenous sort of, like, that's not what it's about. We understand that same-sex couples can provide a healthy, loving environment for a child to be raised in. It's the fact that they need the back and forth of it. And even if, let's say, we'll just take a same-sex couple for example, right? Let's say two women were in a relationship together and they're raising their kid just fine. I got two moms, no big deal. That's great. But if one of them doesn't have an overly masculine tone, and even then, if they're not a man, they cannot properly give their child the male side that they need. That example. It has to be filled by someone. It doesn't mean they can't be a proper parent. It doesn't mean their kid's going to grow up to be a psychopath. It just means that you're tampering with something that's is supposed to be, right? And that's the because the thing is, like, if you look, not always, but men tend to marry their mothers and women tend to marry their fathers.
Mhm.
So if your father's a piece of crap who beats your mom, guess what you're going to date, right? Now, it doesn't mean every person does that, but again, you're playing margins. You're playing the statistic reality of things.
No,
If you're
I just wanted
confused,
clarification there.
yeah, I'm just saying, like, to our listeners, right? Because they're the one who's listening to me yammer on. It's just there's a set thing a child needs, a set of standards to live by and to be raised by. And when one of those or two of those or however many of those standards are not met, the child suffers.
Mhm.
Even if you're in like I've tried people, who I'm in a healthy relationship with my ex, right? We don't fight, we don't argue, but because one of them works all the time or has moved out of state or has their own family now, it drastically alters the way their child now perceives the world. Right? You have a child who was happy a month ago, but now you got remarried, and they're competing with affection with an entirely different set of people. Whether that's the stepmom stepchild relationship, stepdad stepchild relationship, whether that's brothers and sisters anxiety, whether it's only child syndrome now going into a multi-child family, all of these dynamics cause issues, right? And so, we're talking about grief and we're talking about the process. Children often go through these processes for longer periods of time because they're still learning to process emotions as a general rule of thumb. Now you're adding complicated emotions and feelings that
Mhm.
they have to take sometimes years. And with a lot of us, we all can speak to this in some form or another. But all of those emotions that aren't handled properly because they're too young to do so, they often end up in trauma that resurfaces as adults that shapes bad choices and bad events in our relationships and in our lives
So how can we support our loved ones that are grieving?
during the stages of grief.
How can we support them?
I think it depends on the person, right? Like, because that's
Mhm.
what stage they're on and how well you know them.
hmm
And it also depends on like what they're grieving over, because I can admit that something I may grieve over may seem pointless to someone else to be actually like that upset over something.
But at the same time, you're the one grieving, so why would it matter? Like, if I know you're grieving, it shouldn't matter to me what you're grieving over, just the fact that you're getting the help you need to grieve.
Well, like if you're talking, it depends on the person, but like let's say you're grieving over like when my rats die. I've owned 3 rats before, I have 2 right now. I'll grieve, and it may only be a day or two, but most people look at me being like they were rats. They were going to die anyways. Like, so me personally, I know who I can sit there and be like, call quick and cry for 10, 15 minutes that my rats died. And I know who I can go to with certain things that happen because they know how to deal with me when I'm grieving something. Like they're when I'm grieving something that actually like bothers me, like it takes me a long time to get over. I will talk about it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again And there are just some people who can't deal with that.
Okay, so let's say that Chesh is grieving over something. What would be our first step? Like, what would we do to support her in her grieving process?
I would sit there and listen. If she wanted to sit there and talk about it and cry, that's what you do. You
Okay.
chime in when you get a chance, or if she literally just wants to sit there and cry and not have anyone say anything. It just depends on the person and what they need from you as another person.
I
I'd be
don't.
like, hey, Lorelai, Cheshire said.
Cheshire sad. You send me after her. Is that what you do?
At least he's being honest.
I don't
There's
know.
nothing against her. It's just like, what am I going to say that she's not going to dismiss? Like, I
True.
don't have that connection that you guys have with her. So like, it's nothing against her. It's just realistically, if she's like, I'm
Could you
dealing with a really
imagine?
tough time right now, and I go, oh, I can totally understand. She's gonna be like, how the fuck do you understand what I'm talking about? You don't know
Yeah,
me.
but at least he's being honest with it. He's not saying like, "Oh, I wouldn't sit there and be like, "Oh, well, let me get Jesse or Laura quick."
Uh huh.
But it's he would do his part is if she's being like, "Hey, I can't get a hold of Laura or Jesse." Oh, hold on, Laura's sitting right next to me. She didn't hear her Discord go. Like
Uh huh.
he would do his part for what he could do.
So I don't
I
know
mean,
what article
oh,
I found this in. I have no idea where this article came from, but it says, some of the things you can do to support a grieving loved one is initiate contact, which,
Mhm.
we've all done. Get in touch, be available to spend time, respect that your friend may need to cry, hug, talk, be silent, or be alone. Listen is the other one, which Jess had said. And it says here, now, apparently, this is an article written about losing a loved one because it says, don't be afraid to talk about the person who has died. The person you are supporting may want to hear their name. Try to avoid giving advice or using cliches, but talk about the person. There are no words that can really help, but listening can be a great support.
Yeah, like a friend of mine lost a family member, and it was really rough time for them, and I I feel like I handled it somewhat okay, but I'm like, I'm not gonna lie to you, it doesn't go away. You just get used to it.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, it's never gonna go away. You just get used to the absence of that person. You learn to live your life without that person there. Yeah, there are small days of painful pangs every once in a while, of course, but you learn to deal with them because there's no point in your life stopping for the rest of your life because someone is gone. Because, in my opinion, they wouldn't have wanted that for your life, anyways. So, that's usually always what I tell them, especially if it's a parent or a grandparent that they were really close to and they're like, well, I don't know, I don't know how to live my life without them, or this, that, and other things. And I will always look it up in it's not going to go away. You just get used to it and you learn to live your life without them. And a lot of people tell me that's the wrong thing to say, but I'm not going to lie and say, "Oh, it'll get better."
Right. It'll get easier as time goes on.
Yeah, that's
Well,
why I
I
say
mean,
you get
No.
used to it.
well, I mean, Jesse, how many times have I sat like with you when you're having a hard time and like I will tell you it will get better, but I never like promise or I never tell you being like, "Oh, it'll be the same." I'm like, I usually it's not, and you just
Yeah,
you cope.
it depends on what you're grieving over too. Like
Mhm.
it like a loss of a job. Yeah, I promise it'll get better. I will believe that because okay, something big and better will coming. But in certain things like an animal passing or a family member passing or a friend passing, those type of things, no, I will never promise it will get better because
Yeah.
it won't. You just get
Well, and
used to
like
it.
the loss of a relationship, you told me before, you're like, I don't understand this or that or da 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 da, and I usually will sit there and I go, I know, but you'll work through it. It's healing. It's I never promised you things that were out of your grasp. You
Yeah, and
know.
like I have my good days and I have my bad days. I've had a lot more good days lately, and I
Hmm.
fucking love it.
Some of the other things that they suggest in order to help a grieving loved one is to do something together, spend time with them doing just ordinary or positive things like watching a movie or going for a walk. Practical help is also helpful. If somebody has lost someone, you can offer to help cook their meals or watch their children to let them have time to grieve.
Hmm.
And the biggest thing on here that um, a lot of people don't get is grieving is there's no set time length for grieving. It could be short, it could be long. Birthdays and anniversaries may be more difficult for a bereaved person. Um, but some people mourn for a couple of days. Some people mourn for years after a change or a loss, not just a loss of a loved one, but a loss in general.
Well, then, and there's also, I don't remember what it's called, but like, I'll sit there and like, on the day the days my parents passed or my grandfather passed, and like I don't remember it, but like I'll sit there and I'll be like, why do I feel so sad today? Like, it's been a great day, but I feel sad. And then it's like I'll see my siblings post something, oh, it's been so many years, we still love you, dad. And I'll like, that explains it.
Mm-hmm.
Where I don't know if maybe like my brain just shuts it down because it is very painful at times for me to think about my dad. So especially that day, it's like I don't pay attention to, even though like I have to use the date every day at work when I file things, it doesn't click in my brain. Like half the time it'll be a like Halloween or something, and well, okay, Halloween's a bad example because that's my favorite time of year. But like Liam's birthday one time, I sat there, I was working, and I was like, shit, it's my kid's birthday. Like I just forgot that day. Like we are like we had everything planned and everything. It's not like we didn't plan it, but it's just that day it didn't click that, oh, it's Liam's birthday, yay.
Did I ever tell you guys why I fought so hard to get married on April 15th?
Mm. It sounds familiar, but I can't put my finger on it right now because my head hurts really bad.
Chesh, did I ever tell you?
I don't think you did.
So when I was living with the father of my children, his stepfather was my best friend. He died 3 months after my son was born, and it was very, very traumatic for me and very sad. He died on April 15th. So I pushed really hard to get married on April 15th because that's the day I felt closest to him. And that's the day that I could have him at my wedding and feel honor. And yet it was a way
Oh,
to bring happiness to the day that he passed. So that's one way that I've honored him in his
that's
passing.
adorable.
And luckily, my husband is understanding and agreed with it. So, yeah.
Spread around them rumors.
Hmm?
Don't spread around those rumors. People are gonna start expecting things.
No, I expect nothing from you.
Same.
Perfect.
Have you been told just to move on? Just get over it, move on?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Have you tried smiling more?
say stuff like that, and like I know from Jericho, he's just fucking joking.
Yeah.
But well, sometimes I wonder if he's actually joking.
That's part
So
of the fun, the mystery of it.
this article says the term moving on can be unhelpful because as life moves forward, you need to move with it. As each day goes by, you are moving forward, but the phrase moving on can feel as though you need to get over the passing of a loved one or a loss of any kind, honestly.
Yeah,
It's
I was gonna say
important
it's not just a loss of loved one.
it's important to remember that moving on does not mean forgetting, but learning how to live without that person or that whatever it is that you've lost. Moving on doesn't mean that your grief will end, but that you will learn to live with it. Hey, hey, Jess, look at that. Learn to live with it. It was in a magazine or an article or whatever.
Damn, Skippy.
Damn, Skippy.
I think it's important to answer the question of what if it's outside of a loved one?
What do you
Like
mean?
a lot of these grief counseling things that been they always are saying of a loved one. So it's like the only way to support someone who's grieving. Well, what if you don't know them? What if you're not even friends? What if you just come across somebody who's bawling their eyes out? Like, how would you guys handle that situation when you don't have this interpersonal connection that you can try to do something for them?
I have had this situation happen to me when I originally was going through a really bad breakup. I was sat in a call with some friends, and this random guy just joins, and I'm in tears. And he was one of the most comforting people I had ever, like, he listened, I explained everything that was going on, and now we've been friends for multiple years now. But he kind of just sat there and listened and gave his own advice towards the situation and tried to help me come to an understanding. Does that
I
make
guess,
sense?
yeah, I guess it's more of if, like, let's say I park and I'm walking into Target and I see this woman bawling her eyes out. I may stop, ask if she's okay, if she needs anything. But a lot of people, like even myself, if I'm out in public and I'm bawling my eyes out, let's say, I would still say I didn't need anything from anyone else. And I don't think, as not knowing the person, you do not push it, you do not try and interject in the situation, because it could make it worse. But if the person said, I'm having a really rough day, I just need a hug, I would sit there and be like, even though I don't like touching random people, I would sit there and be like, well, is it okay if I give you a hug? And if they say yes, then I would give them a hug. Even though it would make me uncomfortable, I would still do it if that's what they needed. If they needed me to sit there and let them cry, I would do that, just because I know what it's like to feel alone and sad and crying and not have anyone.
What would you do, Jericho?
Great question. Um, so being a follower of the JC, I try to be empathetic in those situations. I have a plethora of advice, but advice is not always what people need. Sometimes they just want someone close or to be heard. So I tend to play it by ear. If the person is receptive to certain things, then I will provide said things.
Again, I'm going to go ahead and put a website down in the description. It's a grief and loss hotline website where you can find many different types of support. Um, some of them are text, some of them are call. That's going to be it for today's podcast.
Like, subscribe, comment, share, follow.
Patreon coming soon.
Yes.
Goodbye.
If you listen to this, tell us what your favorite color is and why.